Do you want us to do introductions by voice or in the chat?
If you do it by your voice. So let's get going with that. So hi, everybody. Welcome to week 5 of our Better Conversations coaching book study. We have really enjoyed it to the point where we've extended it. We're going to go a little bit longer than the 5 weeks we originally planned because it's been just that good. So I hope that you guys are enjoying it too, even if you haven't been able to come to the live session. If you've been going back and watching the videos, we love to have you kind of join us that way. And then also make sure that if you haven't been able to join us live, maybe you have super busy schedule, we are continuing on Thursdays at 3 o'clock. So maybe a future Thursday you could join us. And we're also on Voxer throughout the week. And you can get all the information for how to join the Voxer in the Thinkific course. So you can just hop over there, click right out of an email that I sent you, and you'll be able to go and join us on Voxer. So that would be great. We'd love to have you. So Amy, you're first on my screen. So you want to introduce yourself? And I'm going to take this down so they can see.
Hi, everyone. I'm Amy Rudd. I am an instructional coach in Akron, Ohio. And I'm really glad to be in this conversation with all of you. I feel like I just learned so much from the things that we're discussing, and I appreciate everyone's contribution.
Thanks, Amy. Jessica.
Hi, I'm Jessica Crawford. I am a K-12 instructional coach in Warren, Michigan. We're right outside of Detroit, our little district. And I've also been enjoying this, trying to get my craft, because this year was my first year, kind of a crazy year because I had my baby at the end of November, so I was off for 12 weeks. And then 3 weeks after I got back is when the shutdown happened. So definitely trying to get some skills for next year and keep building on what we started.
That's awesome. I had my baby in September. We had such similar stories. I was back from maternity leave for like 2.5 months and boom, got to stay home again. So same. Christy.
Hi, I'm Christy Terry. I'm from Jackson County, Georgia, which is right outside of Athens, Georgia. This is my 2nd year as a coach, and so I don't know, it's been fun. This group has been really fun. I've enjoyed a lot and enjoyed this book. So thank you, Allison, for organizing all of it.
Sure, love hanging out with you guys. Rita, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, I'm just playing with the buttons here, trying to find it. Rita Withdrawn, academic coach, first year, 3rd through 5th grade campus in Los Palos, California. And I think that joining the group just should give me additional feedback or additional support and additional people that know what we're going through during this, especially during this time too.
Absolutely. And Shelley?
Hi, I'm Shelley Shope, and I am a reading coach or a literacy coach here in Rock Hill, South Carolina. I am coaching at a K-8 charter school, very, very small school. It only has 3 teachers. And this is my very first year, and I actually started in October, so not really at the beginning of the year. So been a little bit like drinking from a fire hydrant, but it's been wonderful, and I have loved this book. Thank you so much, Allison, for doing this study. This has been such a blessing for me, so thank you.
Oh, good. Well, y'all are absolutely blessings to me as well. And I have said on the Voxer too that there are so many things, even though I've read this book before, that have really stood out to me again. It's just such a powerful, really great book. So I'm Allison Peterson. I am finishing up my 6th year outside of the classroom as a coach. I moved to a new school this year, and so I'm trying to launch a new coaching program at this school, but right now it's just me at an independent school that's K through 12 with about 75 teachers. So there's only so much we can do, but I think that thinking about better conversations is really what we need right now in this time of crisis. And so that's what brought all of this on, is thinking about how do we help and support our teachers. And we know that when we've talked a lot about that on this group, that when we go back to school, the emotions are still going to run high, and we're still going to really need everyone, really need to support everyone really well. And so these conversations, if we can improve them here, it can really make a huge difference. So I think it's great work for us to be doing now, even though we're probably winding down the school year finally. I know it's our last week. So I was gonna have you tell me about if you have tried any of these coaching moves on anybody in your life, other than maybe if you've had an opportunity to work with some actual teachers and try a new coaching move, that'd be great too. But I know that some of you have tried to, hey, Mary Jane. Some of you have tried to use it on maybe friend, husband, child. So I see a few of you have. Does anybody want to share a story about something that's worked for them, about trying to share some of these coaching moves? We heard some of them on Voxer if we want to. Not with complete success, but they weren't epic fails either, Rita says. Okay, good. I was attempting with my older son who is 9 because we've had some things we need to work through here during quarantine. But it's hard still when they're so young for them to have an opinion to bring to the table other than that I don't like what you're saying to me. So done the best I can with trying to ask him good questions, give him time to contribute to the conversation so that it's not as top down as it normally would be.
Well, I'll share, but I don't want to be redundant for anyone who's already heard the story on Voxer, but I'll share my story. So I have a son who just completed his associates, and we're trying to figure out what the summer is going to look like, because he's probably going to go on to a 4-year degree. But just kind of in this space of what's this summer going to look like, and we want it to be productive, and we want contribution to the family, even if we're not in a job situation. And so just to set I didn't say this on Voxer, but my family is so supportive and wonderful of everything that I do in education. So they are really familiar with me putting up things on whiteboards just in family dinners, but that's just kind of how we do life. So it wasn't shocking for them to be handed something to read out loud. So it was my husband and my my young adult son and myself. And I just copied page 70 and 71 because I thought it says exactly what I want to say. And so what better way to do it than just read it? And so we just read it paragraph by paragraph, and we stopped and processed and said, I don't want this. Like it says, this is on page 70. Often passive power struggles are conversations that are endured and quickly forgotten. And I think that with my teenagers, I have 3 very compliant teenagers, and I have one not so compliant 6-year-old. So the Lord knew what he was doing when I thought child rearing was a breeze. But so they're really compliant, and but sometimes they'll just yes, ma'am, nod and just take it. And I don't really know what they're thinking. So I really wanted this to be a dialogical conversation. So we read through the whole thing. And then the quote on page 71, is there energy, possibility, and safety here? That's just what I want. I want us all to feel that way. And it was wonderful. And so we went through the conversation just discussing what summer was going to look like, what our expectations, his expectations, how that could look. And we just kept going back to, is there energy, possibility, and safety here? And I feel like it was a really good conversation where everyone spoke and was heard. And it was a great dialogue. So I felt like, yay, success, yay. So that's my little success story.
That's awesome. Has anybody else tried any tricks at home with any of these tricks? Well, it was such a great story, Shelley. Thanks for sharing. Jessica, if you want to share.
Yeah, it wasn't like one of the big ones, but when we were doing the Listen with Empathy chapter, and I've always been one of those that gets uncomfortable with the silence or thinks I'm supporting by saying something or adding something or things like that. So it's just a conversation with my husband where he's explaining the conversation he had with his boss, which was positive. And I just remember because I'm talk with my hands, as you can see, literally sitting on my hands so that I wouldn't try to jump in or to cut him off, and just let him tell the whole thing without even giving what I thought was helpful when it wasn't. So just trying to be more mindful of that. And then I had a friend like totally call me out. She called and I was working on something for work and we're just chatting. She's like, are you too busy right now? Like, and then she wasn't mad, but I was like, you know what? You're right. And I closed the computer and walked away so we could continue the conversation and have like a really honest, two-way dialogue conversation where I was listening and giving my all to it. So, just trying to become more aware and accepting when, oops, I fell off. Thanks for catching me, and fixing it in the moment.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing those. If you're on the mentee, I thought we would also talk about how you're feeling about your ability to foster dialogue. So if you want to put in an answer to that one, if you're confident, feeling okay, had a few successes, or not so confident, how you've been feeling about this chapter and your ability to try those out. I think dialogue just incorporates so many different components of the whole book, right? You have to do the listening with empathy part. You have to think about the toxic emotions and all these pieces. So most everybody's feeling okay or have had a few successes. So that is great. So go ahead.
You know what I think I've realized through this? It's like, I am so absolute done with this COVID joke that everybody is so stressed and it's so stressful that I find myself, I don't even want to try because everybody is at the brink of breakdown. And it's just, even in your own personal family. And it's just like, we just need to get away from each other. Things will be better. So anyway, there you go.
I feel like that too. Like I find my own kids like
This is Rita. For me, it's sort of the same. I want to try things out, but I don't want to try them out with my family anymore. But I want to try it out with my colleagues. So anytime I put in like not a coaching thing, but some kind of questions on an email or on our little Google Classroom or school Google Classroom. Some of the teachers just come back with, they're so overwhelmed and they just can't handle one more thing. So it's, kind of not pushing it as much. So I'm just okay with it until I'm trying it. So I need more practice. But I understand the frustration everybody has because of the situation we are in. And that's just something we cannot control.
I feel like this chapter was a reminder that it's like a constant work in progress. It's not something that you can just do consciously and it's going to come to you. Like you have to make an effort to say, when I enter into this conversation, I'm going to really come in without preconceived ideas and notions and really listen to the person I'm working with and really like hone in on what are their needs and what are they trying to tell me. And I love your Disneyland analogy, Allison, that you shared with us last week. Like,
what's the question?
Yeah, like what's the real question they're going after here?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that I can't remember exactly where that one came from. I just know that at my old school, we talked about it a lot, but it's also kind of underlined in what we have Michael Bungay Stanier talking about in his books, The Advice Trap and The Coaching Habit. He says every time I've heard him speak or I watched him when he was talking to Jim Knight, he said, what they bring you is not actually the real problem. And your job is to help them see and you figure out like what is the real problem through that questioning process. And if you haven't watched it yet, when you have time, go and watch his interview with Jim Knight. It's on Jim Knight's Facebook page. If you, Instructional Coaching, I think it is. And it was so good because he just talks about how like you subtly ask the questions that are the 7 questions that he has, and how you just work them to the point where you say, you know, what's the biggest challenge here for you? But anyway, it usually is, he keeps saying that. I'm like, it's so true. And I even had that moment today where I was super frustrated about something. And I was like frustrated about this thing that was very surface level. And I had to go for a walk to think through in my own head, like, what was I actually frustrated about? And he even talks about it in there, coaching yourself and talking yourself through the question sometimes. So what is the real question? So, yeah.
I watched that that video with the 2 of them in the interview. And what struck me as so interesting, even when I'm a very visual person. So when I look at the 2 of them on this podcast together, and I think these are 2 people who look totally different, don't even look like they would have something in common, and they had such a meaningful conversation. And it was obviously that they were from 2, you could just tell they're just from 2 different worlds and 2 different places. And it was just so great to see how they connected and communicated.
Absolutely. I love that Michael Bungay Sr. talks a lot about just becoming more coach-like. Like he likes to not make it about you are all of a sudden a coach and everyone's speaking on a coach. If you could just be more curious, then you become more coach-like in all of your conversations. And you're like, how can I do that? I want to be like that. So I know y'all do too. So I like that approach. And that was because you said the 3 o'clock question. And it's just never really what they bring you, whatever the surface issue is, which is why when we talked about last week, the idea of toxic emotions, when those emotions come at you, we have to know that whatever is coming at us is not the real issue. It's usually just an emotional reaction to change. And it's just this overwhelming piece. So it's helpful to kind of keep that in mind. So, good. So one of the questions that I had on the discussion questions was, what are some ways that we can kind of try to remove our assumptions? Because he talks about that throughout this chapter of all these assumptions that are in the way, and you hardly even know you have them when you're going into conversations. And I know he gives some tips, so you can kind of dig back into if you saw a quote that would help, or just thoughts on practical ways to remove those assumptions in these conversations that we want to go into. What's on your mind?
I wanted to share something of assumptions and judgments. I think I've been reading this book and I had an aha moment. I was speaking with someone, just having a regular conversation outside of work with a person who I have a lot of conflict with. And this person is telling me something, and I'm hearing in my head all of the assumptions that I'm making. Whereas before I read this book, I would just be flowing with it. Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. And I would be allowing my brain to continue to judge the person as they're speaking. But after reading this book with the judgment, I'm like, whoa, I'm making assumptions about what this person is saying, and I'm making judgments, and I'm not even listening to this person. So for me, it was such a wow, aha moment of don't allow your brain to do that. Stop and realize what you're doing and then stop it. And I was able to say, whoa, just forget that what you're thinking may not be true. Just listen to what this person has to say. And it made a huge difference.
I think that's the aha moment of all of this is like that you really do have control about how you come into a situation, how you come into a conversation, and that you control what you're thinking about. Like, I really think that prior to really exploring coaching and getting pretty far in there, I did not have the understanding that I had control over those things. You know, these emotional places that you go, you think that you have to go there and you think that you have to stay there. But you don't. You can really be mindful and change the way that you come into situations. So that's awesome. Other ways that we can remove assumptions that you think could work.
I think it's the idea of
For me,
keeping in mind that
just
you guys
listening
are.
and
I'm
just
sorry.
not even just clearing mind and looking at the person and really just listen to hear them and not listen so I can figure out what I'm going to say next.
Go ahead, Amy. Did you have something too?
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's really important to like keep in mind that in order for it to be dialogic, it has to be between two people. And if like you're making assumptions, like it's a one-way conversation. So you really have to like shut that assumption part off of your brain and like imagine yourself to be a learning partner with the other person you're in conversation with. Like we're both bringing something to the table. We can both learn from each other. But you have to like just be more aware of what is really happening in your brain. I think one of the things that happens when you're a coach is you want to help them solve the problem like immediately. So you jump to like wanting to give advice, but that's not what this is really about. You want them to come to it on their own by asking better questions.
Absolutely. It just turns everything on its head from what you think you're supposed to do when someone comes to you with a question or a problem. On page 73, I was pretty blown away by this. He says, often our assumptions are tightly tied to our life's work, our loyalty to other people, and our spiritual or etymological beliefs. And for that reason, when our assumptions are challenged, our beliefs about friends, work, right, wrong, God, our very existence seems to be threatened. No wonder people bristle when they're asked to rethink their assumptions. But I just, that idea of their very existence seems to be threatened is like twofold. Obviously, we need to think about when we are feeling threatened and that those assumptions are coming up. And then we also need to know that when we're challenging teachers to think differently, that this is what's happening, is we're not, if we're not careful about how it's going and what we're presenting, then we're going to actually make them question their own existence, right? And their purpose. And this is very important when it comes to teachers, because teachers have identity around teaching and the way they've done it. And it's like, it is who they are. I'm sure there are other professions that hold that tightly to this idea of identity of teacher, but this one is very strong. And so when you start asking them to change what they've always done, you're asking them to change. So then their whole existence comes into question. And all the work that they've done prior comes into question. And you didn't intend to do any of that. But in your coaching process and trying to help them grow, all of a sudden, this is where we landed. But I think it has to do a lot with knowing your own personal beliefs really well, knowing where you might get triggered about something, but then knowing how to be open-minded to an idea. But also you can hear somebody else's idea and it doesn't mean you have to change your personal beliefs, right? I think that sometimes can be the push place where you're like, well, if you're teaching me that, then I have to do what you say. I have to believe what you say. So I think assumptions run really, really deep. I think that was kind of something that was like, how do you help remove your assumptions? Well, they come with you and your personality.
I think this chapter is also good. Just thinking, like for myself, I am a coach at a pre-K through 5 school, but I have over 100 staff members, so I depend heavily on kind of my leadership team. So like each of my lead teachers, kind of, they are kind of a coach in their own, because it's just impossible to coach everybody. And so I almost think this would be such a good chapter to kind of look at with, my leadership team, just to see that this is all of us together in this work and we're all thinking partners together. So I could definitely see how this could lead to that work as well for me. But
oh, no, that's super exciting. I love that idea of finding teacher leaders within your environment and then intentionally training them these coach-like type of moves and understandings and mindsets, because small changes can make big differences in how they approach the teachers that they work with. And they don't know, because none of us knew before we started diving deep into understanding coaching how you come across to somebody when you're doing top down or advice giving. Like, you really don't have any concept of it. And so if you can start to help them see it with your time, like you're saying, if you're working with them, you can really start to change conversations. I have a situation like that at my school where there's a teacher who I've been working with who will go to another teacher, and every time she works with that other teacher, she's like, she doesn't listen to me and she just tells me what to do, and just it defeats her. And so I end up, when she's working with me, she's like, well, why is it different working with you? And I'm like, it's not different. I'm asking you questions, and she can tell the difference, and it's just subtle. It's so subtle she can't even explain why it's different. So those subtle changes, if you can help your teacher leaders take them on, you will create that like domino effect of more coach-like happening. And I love that these books are so approachable. I mean, this one is very approachable. It's a deep work, but it's approachable. And those Michael Bungay Stanier books are small and super approachable and easy to read. They would be things that would be really easy to bring to a group of teacher leaders and just say, let's read this together, and foster dialogue with them about what they're reading. And the work will happen in their hearts. You won't have to do much other than encourage them, you know? So what else stuck out to you as something that you wanted to really think about for changing your coaching practice, or just what else got your attention?
Under the part about advocacy and making sure we can clearly articulate and advocate for our ideas, I think the one that really kind of started to stand out, and it's something I was starting to pick up on this year, is clarify the meaning of words and concepts. And he gives the example of like engagement, about how every teacher has a different definition of what engagement is, and that can lead to a very difficult conversation where you're struggling to communicate. And I just think one assumption that I've caught myself having and that I'm working on fixing is I like just assume what other teachers might know. But I mean, it's still a fine line, because you also don't want to talk to them like, I think you're dumb and you need to know this. But making sure like I'm very clear, like if I'm talking about literacy, like let's define what I'm saying by literacy. It's not like you have to read a novel in your classroom. Like that's not what I'm saying when I'm working with the secondary teachers, but just making sure I set up that clear definition of what this means, and then that goes right into the context, and this context is what we're talking about. And then it all kind of dominoes back. Then you have the curse of knowledge, like just because I know this doesn't mean everyone else does, and just finding that balance to make sure everyone understands what it is and being clear and direct, because it's something I had to learn as a teacher. Not every student is like me, and it's the same thing. Not every adult is the same and has the same backgrounds and the same experiences. And literacy was my passion, but that doesn't mean it's going to trickle over everywhere else. So making sure you're clear on what you're advocating for, why, and what it truly means for what you are talking about and bringing to the table.
That's so true. The curse of knowledge is very real. And it's also the place where we catch ourselves in judgment, I think, is because, well, of course, why don't you know that, right? Any thought in your head that is like, well, of course you should know that, is you getting caught in the curse of knowledge, because all it is you've learned it prior to them learning it. But it feels like, well, they should know this already. I can't believe they don't. And that is a place where I've seen coaches go to get into a really spinning a negative place of judgment, right? Of like, well, they should know, like, but they don't. So what are we going to do since they don't? So I think those are absolutely perfect. Like defining things with advocacy and curse of knowledge is a real thing for sure.
I think
I underlined that same area, and I put on the margin, I wrote about the importance of calibrating understanding before you go into a conversation. So like if you guys are working on, I don't know, like a specific learning strategy or whatever, I was just thinking about how we did this during our guided reading time of the day. Like we calibrated it around each of the routines that were part of that day. So then everyone chimed in on what does it look like, what does it sound like, and we made like anchor charts that had that specific characteristic on it. So then everyone had a better understanding of what we were saying should happen during this time of the day. And I think that's really helpful so that we're all speaking the same language. And it helps to get rid of those assumptions, you know?
I think that part really hit me too and made me kind of reevaluate and change what I want to do for the fall. We have some initiatives coming up with some dyslexia laws in our state. And I have a lot of background in that, and I have a lot of knowledge, and it's that curse of knowledge that comes up. And when you bring up things like even open syllable, closed syllable, what, you know, and I use these terms, and you get that look and you know that teachers don't understand. So it's really the balance of how to tell them. So I've decided to do like a flipped classroom model where they're going to have some videos to introduce all of these things to them. So when we get together to have a conversation, then they feel like they already have some knowledge and are not coming in not knowing, and they feel like they have a little bit more knowledge to add to the conversation and not coming in feeling like, I don't know anything about this and I know I probably should.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I love that idea. I've been thinking a lot about how you launch the school year with your teachers. Even if you're not a brand new coach to the building, to just kind of like reset around here's who I am and here's how I can help you. So I've been doing some thinking about what are the best ways to do that so that you can set up the situation. But then also, you know, reading this book too, it's like, how do you make it not feel top down, even to just tell them what coaching is, like, you know, or remind them what coaching is. So how do you make it an interactive activity where they watch a video or they read an article or something either prior to or during that time with teachers to say, you know, let them think about this idea of coaching. What is this? And so I've been putting that together because I'm going to present on it for the Simply Coaching Summit in July. So I'm pretty excited about that. And this book and our conversations have absolutely been influencing my thinking. Other parts of the book that stood out to you in this chapter, I mean.
I have a question that somewhat stemmed off of page 79 about being humble, but it kind of veered in a different direction. So I am absolutely loving this book, and I would love all of my coaching to be exactly like this book, with having better conversations. I'm just wondering if there are any coaches in this talk that struggle with balancing between talking to your teachers about maybe what the state requires or what the district requires, and teachers just either being slightly resistant or just saying, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do what the requirement is, and where that leaves us as the coach when we're in that conversation. So being humble and also saying, but there are these requirements that our district asks of you, as far as I'm a literacy coach, so it would be as far as concerning literacy in the classroom. And I just wanted to hear some perspectives on if that's where a coach even needs to be, and maybe I'm putting myself there. I felt like maybe that's where I needed to be with saying, okay, here are the requirements, but maybe that's not where I need to be, and I would just love some feedback on that.
Well, does your admin play a role in that conversation so that it's not just you as the coach and you can kind of begin to separate from being the one to enforce? Is that something that your admin partners with you on?
In my experience, the admin plays the role with me in knowing what the requirements are, but not so much with the teachers. It was more me with the teachers, explaining what those requirements were. So if that makes sense, just an expectation that my coaching would be in that vein and we would be moving toward what the district needed through my coaching. But yeah, it was up to me.
Okay. Mary Jane, did you have something you wanted to add?
Well, that's exactly the spot that I'm in. And often I think that where I find myself is going through conversations with, well, I understand, because usually the frustration of I don't have enough time, I don't feel like I have enough training, or, it's changing up or giving up something that they're hold dear to them as educators. And so I've really just said, well, how can I help you? What is the best way that I can help you be as effective in this as possible, and I just can say, this isn't something that I'm in control over, change over. This is what it is. How can I help you? And I just don't want to be in the spot, which I have been in the past, where I'm held accountable to determine whether they complete that or not as an evaluative form. That's where I want to draw the line. I want to help you do everything you can to implement, but I don't want to be the one saying XYZ is going to happen because you're not following district guidelines.
Yeah, so that's why I asked about admin. I know that it's not always a perfect scenario with your administrators, like 100%. The reality is not always the ideal. So, so thinking about ways that you can have the admin be the ones giving the requirements to say, these are the things I expect you to do because they are the evaluator. In Jim Knight's video, I think it's the one where he talks about the 7. There's 2 different videos that he could talk about this in. There's one where he's like the 7 success factors of coaching. That one's just him rattling off the things that are going to help you with coaching. And then he's got one about how the principal can help. And I think maybe it's that one. But he says this idea of if the coach sets the standard, the admin sets the standard and says, this is what I expect you to do, and this is where I'm going to see it happening, then he can leave the choice open to say, well, you can go to a conference, you can read a book, you can read an article, or you can work with the coach. And here's this coach, and she's available, and she can help you. She's knowledgeable. She'll be able to help you. But, again, giving that choice aspect and how they can get to the end of the goal. And one of the things that you guys were just both saying, being literacy, I think too, you have elements, components of the things that need to be implemented. Like this balanced literacy is something I'm working on too, but there's so many components of that. And even within, let's say even within guided reading, there are another 10 components. So sometimes breaking down the list of things and literally showing it to them and saying these, and trying not to overwhelm them, but these are some things that we could get started with. Which one do you want? So I think the idea of adding choice, like we've talked about in this book too, or we talked about it with the partnership principles of autonomy and choice, and trying to find a place where they do feel comfortable. Where could we start? And trying to maybe get them to a place where they could just do baby steps. Now, I think baby steps can, we got to get baby steps to keep rolling. So that's tricky. But if you have other thoughts, everyone in the group, I know that this is the place. This is the place where the coach is always in between. Is she the enforcer, or can she truly just help with implementation? But she's being asked to enforce by her admin. And how do you find that balance? And I think some of it has to be going back to the admin and saying and helping to reestablish your role with them. So that they understand what your role is and what their role is. And I know that you're not, but it's this kind of coach from the middle up, piece where you're trying to help them understand what the role is. If you have the ability to sit with them and say, here's how I can support your initiative or the district's initiative. Amy, did you have thoughts? Sorry.
Yeah, no, I was going to add on to what you were saying. It reminds me of when we were watching the videos of the partnership principles and talking about choice, and that when people can't say no, they feel like their rights are being taken away. I mean, when they don't have a choice in the matter. So I think I would ask the question, what is it that you're saying no to? Like, why are you saying no to? To really dig in and find out, is it something that they just don't really know what to do? Is that the reason they're saying no? Or is it because they're opposed to that method of instruction or whatever the case may be? But just digging deeper with your questions maybe can help them come to a realization of, there are some things that they already are doing that could support that. They could work out the problem on their own. Ideally, that's what we get to as a coach, hopefully. But it really did remind me of the choice principle and the reminder from him, like in the example, you're firm on your standards, but it's flexible in how you get there. Like these are the things that we need to cover, but how you get there is up to you as the teacher. That is where I believe treating teachers as professionals is so so important.
I think too, if you can help them see what they could use that they're already doing, so that you can limit the feeling of change that they're experiencing. So like if there is something that they're already doing that you can kind of help them see how that piece will stay, even if it's a piece where you're like, this is not the piece I really want to, like this piece can stay and this piece can stay, and look, this piece can stay. Help them see too that with the pieces of the change that are not going to change, it can often help to alleviate the stress around this idea of like everything's changing around me. But I think too, just what we were just talking about, just helping them get to that place. Oh, I was going to say their philosophy. I think sometimes especially with balanced literacy, sometimes it's a philosophy. Like they don't understand the philosophy. They don't understand why they should believe it. So going back and doing the philosophical work of having them read an article or asking them to think about what they believe about teaching reading, like get back to the basic of it, because I think they're sometimes hurdled by, they don't actually think that they agree with it yet. And so maybe to get them to start a new instructional method, we've got to help make sure they understand the philosophy. So all of our advice giving, though, is not going to be as helpful as you diving in there and thinking about what's the real challenge.
What would you do?
What's the real challenge here for you, Shelly?
So what I did in that situation, I just had this sweet teacher who in South Carolina, we are really implementing the workshop approach in literacy. And that is a whole new concept for my school, absolutely brand new. And when we were just discussing going through a coaching cycle and talking about how that might work, the teacher just is not interested in the workshop model. And so my response was, I am, and it was just on the fly. I just said, I'm here for two reasons. One is to support you in any way possible. That's my number one reason. But number two is to make you aware of what our state is doing. What the expectations are for our state, and our state is that we will teach literacy using a workshop model. So, but in that moment, I loved what Amy said about what are you saying no to? Because I don't think that the teacher was saying, no, I'm not going to teach. I'm not, no to everything. I wish I would have dug a little deeper. I think I was, I'm new and I didn't know what to say. And so I wish I would have come back, because I know that teacher, oh my word, she loves her babies. I mean, she loves her students. She's so committed and she's a wonderful teacher. And in that moment, I just felt the conflict and I didn't know where to go with it. But if I would have dug deeper and said, what exactly are you saying no to? I bet we could have had a little bit better of a dialogical conversation.
Well, this book has caused me to go back and reflect some of the things that you said. And one thing I know, in trying to be helpful and trying to do, especially when we get mandates from the state, I have read all of the pages and pages and articles and information, and there's so much to dive through that I kind of then give the abbreviated version. But I've realized sometimes that's not what needs to happen. I'm trying to be helpful, but I don't then think that they get the big picture of what that idea is. So I've realized that when the state or the district provides checklists and specifics, that I can provide that exact information, and maybe a little abbreviation, but I don't need to do all that for them, because then I think it takes away their learning and understanding of the whole big picture. So I've kind of weaned back of only giving bits and pieces and saying, I know this is a lot of information, but here it is.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's where like an article or something that can come around maybe with a group or a grade level group or wherever you think your groupings would be good. But for them to have an opportunity to just, rather than you coming in and saying, here's what the state says, we said, let's just read about what balanced literacy is. And then, or what workshop model is, and where maybe it's in the beginning of your curriculum. Like if you're implementing Lucy Calkins, like maybe it's just, let's read the intro together and talk about it. Like, whatever it is that might help anchor back to them doing the thinking to get them there to say, oh, this is going to be a great thing for me to try. And I know that it takes a while to shift thinking, but what you're talking about, Mary Jane, is like doing the thinking for them and then just like telling them about it. And that's what oftentimes that's the gap. Like that's why they're saying no, is because they haven't done the thinking. But we don't want to make them do the thinking because they're going to push back on that too. So, but that's what you can try to facilitate. I think becoming the facilitator of that type of thinking in some way, article, video, meeting, and then realizing it's going to take 3 or 4 of those before they start to come on board with the why. And then maybe they'll start trying the actual instructional strategy once the why has motion and movement, aha moments around that. So they just need more time with it most of the time. Well, we're getting close to the end here, ladies. What else is on your mind that we want to talk about before we close up? These are great. Good conversation today. I'm just curious. We kind of have talked about this already, having those conversations with your admin at the beginning of the year. I know, Amy, you shared that agreement that you guys use. Like, is that something that maybe helps support this piece of the conversation when you're having trouble and you're being the one to implement these? You feel like you're being asked to go in and tell the teachers what they're supposed to do versus the admin taking that ownership?
Mm-hmm. I think that when you have that partnership agreement with the principal, that came from Joelle and Killian from Taking the Lead, which our district adopted looking at that. But having all of that groundwork laid in advance is really important, because I don't know, like with you guys, but like with our coaching program, like we're not evaluating teachers in any way, shape, or form. Like we're a teacher too. Like we're in the same union with the teachers. Like we're their partner. And so like if it came down to someone implementing or not implementing, that would be on the principal to have the conversation with them. And that would be something as a coach, like you would have that like spelled out in advance in your partnership agreement with your principal before the year even starts. Like we start every year with going through that and, clearly putting down the expectations. But I was just going to say too, like after watching her conversation with Jim Knight from a couple weeks ago on the instructional coaching group, like there's some refining that needs to happen with, like spelling out the roles of the coach. because we originally were looking at those 10 roles. And if you really want to get the shift, like we need to be more in coaching cycles with teachers, not just being in the role of resource provider, or, it's that, she wrote that good article on coaching heavy or coaching light. And really going back to that, and like, we need to do more in the area of coaching heavy. But then it was like this challenge of how are you going to do that in the middle of a pandemic? So what is this going to look like next fall? It's just kind of like, I don't know. There's so much to think about.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's that same thing though, facilitating conversations and spaces, going right back to this chapter, the safe spaces for conversations. And I love that quote that he has in there about, is there energy, possibility, and safety here? So if we can create environments where there's energy, possibility, and safety, and we're going in looking for ways to create that environment and then facilitate instead of top down tell, I think we have the ability to impact and create a safe space for, hey, this is a pandemic. I know there's a lot going on, but what can we do for this component? And I think that can be part of our role as coaches, for sure. Well, ladies, any other thoughts? Okay, I think next week's gonna be really good with those asking better questions, chapter 5. Get us some really concrete ways to ask questions, open-ended ones, non-judgmental ones, all of that. So it's actually kind of a short chapter, so should be easy to get through. And then we'll kind of keep going and just see how much longer we can keep this up. So how many of you are finishing school this week? I know Christy said she was. Is everybody finishing school this week? No, not yet. Not yet. Okay. How much longer, Jessica and Mary Jane, do you have?
We're already done.
Okay, you're already done.
We go till, I'm trying to remember the date. I think it's like June 15th, but Michigan starts after Labor Day.
Oh.
And our district also takes a week off in February. We're one of the last ones in the area that does that. So we're much later than everyone else.
Wow. Even with this COVID thing, you've had to go that far, that long.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, because we had to make sure we have enough, that we still have enough days and everything and all of that. So like unofficially, like things will be wrapping up that Friday, and then there'll be that Monday, Tuesday to finish, if any students got to finish stuff or teachers have to finish up and everything. So yeah, we'll be all the way till the 18th next year because Labor Day is so late and we're still starting after Labor Day. As of right now, obviously things could change. So it's crazy when I see all my friends like around the country finishing up. But then again, when they're back like in August, I'm like, I'm still at the beach. See ya.
Yeah.
Hey, this is exciting. I was registering for graduate class for my master's degree, the second master's, and guess what the book is?
That's awesome.
Yes, I feel like I'm ahead of the game for an accelerated pace summer class. So I'm like, whew.
Nice.
That's
awesome.
Yeah.
I love that a graduate course would actually use this book. Like, that's amazing to me.
Well, it's a master's degree in mentoring,
right.
Coaching and mentoring. So,
oh, okay, that's fine.
Oh, I was just going to ask what it was because why would we use a book, right? So that is awesome.
We have a county coaching network, and they sent out a survey for suggestions for next year. And we did student-centered coaching this year, but I suggested better conversations. I was like, I really think that this would be great for the whole little network that we have.
Yeah, I did the same thing for my district.
Mm-hmm.
That's good. Well, my favorite thing about it is that it's by somebody who's talking specifically about instructional coaching. I mean, like I said, there are a lot of business coaching books out there, but this one is specific to the field. And I think, very few other books are very specific to the field. So it feels really practical. Yeah.
Hey, Jessica, this is off topic. I just booked flights to Michigan like half hour ago.
I've been meaning to ask, like, where did you live in Michigan? Where'd you go to school?
I went to Central and then Grand Valley.
Okay.
In Big Rapids.
Yep. I went to Western. So
Okay.
while I live back on the east side now, I know the west side. Yep.
Yep, I'm West Side, and then my family still lives there, so I took advantage of cheap flights.
Yes, exactly.
How's the weather there? Do you guys have flooding where you live?
I am away from the flooding. I'm not in Midland, Michigan. So we have not been affected, but like, yeah, it's pretty devastating where it did happen. And it like the pictures, like I can't believe it's real. And it's my state and that's where it's happening. So my husband works in insurance. His office doesn't have that area, but he's close to the people in the office that does. And so, he has been reaching out to see, I mean, they can't even really do anything right now, but also reaching out to, the workers that have been affected. One of the people he knows, they have 2 young kids. They had to leave their house and just find somewhere else to go.
Wow.
It's bad.
Oh, that's so scary.
Mhm.
Where are you from, Jessica? What part of Michigan?
Well, I grew up in Warren, right outside of Detroit, and now we live in New Hudson, which is between Novi and Brighton, like however much you know from there. And then my husband grew up in Coloma on the west side, right outside of St. Joe.
So fun, but sad about the flooding. All right, ladies. Well, until next week.
Bye.
Chat on Voxer. See you soon. Have a great weekend for sure.
You too.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Allison.
Bye, Rita. Thanks for joining us.